FBI Special Agent Tracy Kingsmith, a.k.a. Stacy the Masseuse, sat at the conference table in the makeshift command center set up at the Giza Hotel as her superior, Mark Normand, pounded the conference table in fury. "You're telling me we have satellites that can read the label on a Coke bottle, but we can't locate one man we had in our sights 3 hours ago?" the pot-bellied, graying bureau man grumbled. "Let me explain," said an NSA specialist. He punched a button, and a satellite photo showing the roof of the Pink Panther appeared on a screen at the front of the room. When the subject exited the back entrance, he passed through a dark alley. There wasn't enough light for a good image. We're having the image enhanced as we speak. Las Vegas is more than 84,000 square miles. That's a lot of ground to cover, even with the manpower at our disposal. The multi-agency task force working on the manhunt also included the Department of Homeland Security, the CIA, and the Defense Intelligence Agency, in addition to at least 4 other outfits Tracy had never heard of. Swimming in alphabet soup is how one of her colleagues termed such sessions. "Unfucking-believable," fumed Normand, who headed the task force. Tracy saw an opening and took it. "Maybe that's our problem. Maybe he's not above ground." "Are you suggesting that he's in the sewer?" said the CIA man dubiously. "Like in The Fugitive?" "I didn't kill my wife," choked red-haired FBI agent Malloy, quoting Harrison Ford in the famous sewer scene of the movie The Fugitive. "I don't care," the Defense Intelligence Agency rep quoted Tommy Lee Jones. Everyone laughed. The female agent pulled out a chart from her carrying case and expanded on her theory. "It's technically a storm drain system," she said. "There are more than 350 miles of flood channels under the city, and it's largely habitable, though I wouldn't want to build a summer house down there. According to some estimates, as many as 700 tunnel people call it home." A tall woman, close to 6 feet, with a rapid, clipped manner of speaking. Tracy was a graduate of Rutgers, cum laude, and her research skills had been among the attributes that had impressed bureau recruiters. Tracy was fluent in Spanish, French, Italian, German, Arabic, and Pashto. The first 4 of these she had actually learned before she entered college. Her parents were of modest means. Her father was an Episcopal minister who'd served 20 years as a missionary in China, and her mom was a school librarian. They were firm believers in education as a means to climb the social ladder. From the age of 5, her father introduced her to foreign languages through books and audio tapes. And beginning with Spanish, she learned 1 every 2 years. The burdensome Rutgers tuition was paid for by a basketball scholarship. Tracy was a gifted athlete and continued to maintain a state of fitness through running, weight training, and kickboxing. Tracy was a black belt in Kung Fu, one of the reasons she was so furious she'd allowed herself to be overcome by the relatively shrimping Ali Nazir. She was justly proud of her figure, long, lean legs, and high, taut buttocks. Yet, truth be told, the agent had not had a date in 8 months, nor 6 in a year. She was, as her female friends put it, very, very picky. To be considered boyfriend material, the suitor had to be African-American, a churchgoer, exceed her height, 5 feet 10½ inches to be exact, and have an income exceeding her own. Some potential boyfriends were intimidated, though some would, in a gentlemanly manner, retreat from the field, saying, "You're too good for me." The fact was, men tended to find her brittle and high-strung. Tracy pointed to the map. "If he's down there, he could go beneath our perimeter and reach Lake Mead in a matter of hours." An agent appeared in the doorway. "The computer-enhanced image of the alley is back, sir. It shows the subject approaching the dark truck and going under it." "The truck was searched, wasn't it?" "Our men went through it with a fine-tooth comb," confirmed the representative from Homeland Security. "Call it the image of the alley as it looks now," said Tracy. Normand nodded, and up popped an enlarged image of the alley on the conference room screen. "Here's the alley with the truck gone," she said. Where the truck had been, only a manhole and a flattened soda can remained. Normand swiveled his chair slowly until he faced Mr. Homeland Security. "No one noticed that there was a goddamn manhole cover at the scene?" he growled. "Did it need a big orange 'down here' arrow on it?" The Homeland Security man looked as if he wanted to pull a vanishing act himself. Tracy gave herself the pleasure of flashing a quick, smug smile. Then she came to his rescue. "There was a lot of confusion at the scene," Tracy said. "And that kind of pandemonium." "That's nice. Bring me the heads of the clowns who searched the truck," snapped Normand. He addressed Tracy, to her delight. "So we send a party down there." "I would suggest 10 8-man teams," Tracy said. At the end of the table, a white-bearded man, who'd been introduced only as Mr. Jones, puffed thoughtfully on a pipe. Exactly what organization he worked for was something of a mystery. Tracy had been told, "That information is strictly need to know." "It's vital that he be taken alive," Mr. Jones declared. "The information that he has about terrorist networks, the Jihadist Brotherhood, and the Warriors of Allah in particular, is invaluable." Normand nodded. "Understood." Tracy cleared her throat. "Sir, I want to lead the search team." Her boss hesitated. "After what happened, I think I'm owed a little payback," she said. Tracy was certain she heard a low snicker from her colleague Malloy, but ignored it. Normand pounded the table. "It's your show. Let's roll." Tracy shot out of her seat. As the crowd poured out of the room, Agent Malloy whispered to her, "Your feminine wiles came through again. This is going to be a real feather in your cap, if you catch the guy." Tracy ignored the redhead, but couldn't resist saying, "By the way, Malloy, I thought you told me your sister was an ophthalmologist. Don't forget to get her out of lockup when her interrogation is over. She'll get cold in that G-string." Malloy stood there, trying to think of a comeback, but by the time he did, the room was clear. X hadn't the vaguest clue where he was. The tunnel, about 8 feet high and 5 feet wide, was as dark as the inside of a womb. His hands groped the sides of the tunnel and found them slick with slimy algae. He recoiled in disgust, but he forced himself to slide along them for support, for to fall into that foul water was unthinkable. He sloshed through the now knee-deep water, through which floated plastic bags, styrofoam cups, and crushed beer cans. It was like wading through the digestive tract of some garbage-eating sci-fi monstrosity. "It reeks like a week-old corpse down here," he thought, clapping his left hand over his nose while the right clung to the tunnel wall. X had expected it to be hot, but the temperature was actually at least 30 degrees colder than above ground, and the fugitive felt goosebumps rising on his arms. The stream, though shallow, roared like a mountain river. Occasionally, from far above, X could also hear the rush of traffic and the occasional rattle of manhole covers. Retrieving his getaway car and the clean identity of Steve Holdenbrook was, of course, now a lost cause, but X had a plan. He had a friend, or right, an acquaintance, for X had no friends, as an ordinary person would understand the term, who operated a legal brothel about 50 miles outside Vegas. If X could make it there, he could probably find a temporary refuge. X's face encountered a spider web that stretched the breadth of the tunnel, and he brushed it away in revulsion. "The bug that made that thing must be the size of a raccoon," he thought, wiping lingering strands from his cheeks. It was slow going. About 100 feet later, he felt a punch to the rib cage as he slammed into a protruding lateral pipe. X lost his footing and, horror of horrors, fell to his hands and knees in the water. He scrambled to his feet, screaming in disgust and fury. He hated germs. He hated dirt. "Why is this happening to me? It isn't fair." "Yuck! Yuck! Yuck!" His voice echoed through the tunnel, and he cursed himself for his stupidity. Hardly the time for loud complaints. X trudged on. About 150 yards further down the tunnel, X came to a juncture where a sewer drain, 15 feet above, cast a parallelogram-shaped beam of light, unveiling graffiti scrolls and arcane official markings reminiscent of hieroglyphics. The sudden illumination also revealed cockroaches scuttling over the walls, while crawfish the size of trout wallowed in the green-brown water. Compared to that loathsome sight, the dark was almost comforting. In the distance, X heard approaching voices. Reluctantly, he abandoned the oasis of light and broke into a run, splashing in the opposite direction. Tracy and a team of 8 heavily armed agents were at this point no more than 500 yards to the east. There were 10 such teams pouring into the tunnels from various points of entry. The searchers were outfitted with masks, hazmat suits, and rubber waders that reached to their waists. Tracy's high-intensity LED flashlight illuminated rats swishing through the water, on top of which floated a child's doll, a basketball, and a moldy, torn-up sneaker. Though theoretically protected from biohazards, the overall repulsiveness of the place brought Tracy nearly to the point of retching. Only her pride prevented her from ripping off her mask and puking in full view of the otherwise all-male crew. Pulaski, an expert from the city's Streets and Sanitation Division, who looked a little bit like Tony Soprano, guided them, pausing now and then to consult a map. They'd reached yet another fork and had to decide which way to go. "We're just on the Bonanza Road now," the bare-bellied guide informed her, panting from the effort of their descent. "That way leads east. That's west." Tracy flashed her light down one corridor, then the other, each equally forbidding. "We split up," she decided. "That cuts us down to 4, protested a husky male subordinate. "I can divide, Agent Creevy," she said sharply. X sloshed down a snaking tunnel, guided by blind instinct. To his alarm, he saw 2 pinpricks of light appear suddenly in the distance. As the far-off flashlight swiveled in his direction, he crouched down, barely ducking the beams in time. Then, with no other option, he lay flat, head under water. After holding his breath as long as he could, close to a minute, he surfaced, gasping for breath. The lights were gone. He struggled to his feet and staggered on. Tracy walked alongside the husky male agent, who was just a few years older than herself. "So, are you married or what?" Creevy asked casually. She couldn't believe she was being hit on, decked out in full hazmat attire, mired in crappy water, and in the midst of the most intense manhunt the city had ever seen. "That's not appropriate," she responded sternly. "Just making small talk. Yeesh, excuse me." The talk at headquarters was that Tracy was a lesbian, a theory G-men could not resist frequently putting to the test. "Hey, what happened at the Giza?" the agent blundered on. "You wouldn't believe some of the rumors floating around. Some people are even saying you gave the guy a—" "Shh! I see something," she whispered. X emerged from a narrow tunnel, and suddenly a bright beam of light shone in his face. He cowered from it like a vampire avoiding sunlight. Then he raised his hands quickly. "I beat the odds making it this far," he thought. A hoarse voice came from behind the glare. "Are you from the city?" X didn't skip a beat. "Yes," he said, lowering his hands. "What are you doing here?" He pumped as much authoritative bass into his voice as he could muster. "This area is off limits." "Hunting rats," the stranger said. "I sell the pelts for women's winter hats." "I see," X said, then paused and added, "That can't be true." "No, but then again, you're not from the city now, are you?" The stranger directed the flashlight at himself, and X could see that he was a wrinkled, 70-something man wearing the tattered remnants of a priest's garb, including a stained white collar. "Are you lost?" the old man inquired. "I beg your pardon?" "It looks like you've lost your way, son." Yes, he said. "I'm a reporter for the Las Vegas Sun. We're doing a report on life beneath. The old man raised his hand, stopping X mid-babble. The priest could see right through his line of bullshit. "Come, follow me," he said, gesturing with a crooked, yellow-nailed finger. X hesitated. The old geezer was clearly nuts. The question was how nuts. He could be some kind of serial killer, preying on the derelicts who supposedly haunted this loathsome place. An old movie called Chud, Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dwellers, came to mind, and he briefly imagined his bones being gnawed on by rats, while the creepy cleric dined on his kidneys. "Come quickly," the priest whispered. Well, beggars can't be choosers, X thought, and stepped toward the light. A moment later they were hunched over, wading through a 5-foot-tall tunnel, ankle-deep in thick, sloopy sludge. "You actually live down here?" X asked, astounded. "I minister to the people of this place," the old man said. "The homeless, the hopeless that find themselves here." X had heard rumors that beneath some cities drug addicts and lunatics dwelled in the sewers and subway tunnels, but had always dismissed them as urban legends. "There are about 40 people in my little flock. Men, women, children." "And the church pays you to do this?" X knew that Catholic priests weren't paid much, but even the bundle raked in by evangelical preachers at megachurches, whom X had long admired as the greatest scam artists of them all, wasn't enough to entice any sane person to work in this hellhole. The priest chuckled. "The church lost track of me long ago," he said. "I wasn't excommunicated. I simply fell off the radar." That makes a little more sense, X thought. So I'm talking to a fallen angel. "I came here to gamble. The roulette wheel was my poison. I gambled away church funds to the tune of $43,207. This is home for me now." He pointed his beam at a corner where 4 big pipes formed a rectangle. A bed hung suspended from wires about 4 feet from the floor. It was composed of couch cushions and a rotten wooden door. A stack of old National Geographics served as a pillow. On the walls were pictures that X recognized vaguely from his days as a Catholic schoolboy as saints. That was St. Francis over there, wasn't it? "It's not much, but it keeps you dry at night," the priest said of his accommodations. "Night and day? Is there any difference down here?" X wondered. This made even the most barren monastic cell look like digs at the Ritz-Carlton. "How long have you been down here?" he asked. The old priest stroked his beard and thought for a moment. "Now, let's see. 3, 4, 5 years now." X shook his head in disbelief. "Have a seat," the priest said, pointing at a battered car seat upholstered in what had once been fine Corinthian leather. How the chair had ended up down here was anyone's guess. X pondered the mystery as he sat down. He knew he should keep moving, but he was physically and mentally spent. He had vaguely hoped the old man might be able to hide him somewhere, for right now he only longed for a few moments' rest. "Care for some crackers?" the old man said, retrieving a cellophane-wrapped package from a tin on the bed. X was indeed hungry, but he had a feeling those crackers dated from the Eisenhower administration. "Not just yet." "Are you Catholic?" the priest asked. X had not set foot in a church of any stripe in 15 years. "Well, not practicing. I was raised as one." "I can hear your confession, if you wish." "Excuse me?" "It still counts, if that's what you're wondering. As I said, I was never defrocked, deserving of that as I may be." I don't really have anything to say." The priest smiled wryly. "So you've led a blameless life, have you, my boy?" he said in a mock Irish brogue, the kind an old movie priest might employ. Is this guy some kind of mind reader? X could only presume that his desperate appearance suggested criminal behavior. "Thanks, but I don't have time." "It may be later than you think," the old man said. "Listen, son, you can keep running from who you are, but sooner or later you'll have to choose which life to lead." The old man was creeping X out now. The priest continued,
Find something beyond yourself to live for before it's too late."
In the distance, X heard multiple feet splashing through water, and although it meant the enemy was at hand, it was almost a relief to be rescued from the conversation.
"Listen, I've got to get out of here. The truth is, I'm being hunted. I suspected that a little bit. Please, which tunnel should I take?"
The priest chewed that over for almost 30 seconds, then pointed.
"Go 75 yards down here. Then, where it forks, take the tunnel to the left. Another 50 yards or so, take a right. Another 20 feet, and you'll find a narrow tunnel on the left. It's an abandoned shaft. I don't think it's even on the maps."
"Left, right, left, got it," X said.
Thank you, Father." "Bless you, my son," the priest said. "May the Lord give you a chance to redeem yourself."
X began to back away, then the old man said,
"Wait."
He handed the identity thief his flashlight, handle first.
"You need a light to guide you."
X backed away, turned, then bolted into the tunnel. Tracy and her party were closing in on a moving figure, identified with the help of an infrared sensor that picked up body heat. Another team was covering the only escape path, so the target was cornered. Her heart beat faster in anticipation of finally nailing their quarry. Normally, Tracy was cool as a cucumber. Some co-workers even called her cold. But after that humiliating episode in the hotel room, well, this was personal. She had, of course, been given a safe word to use if she got in a jam, but believing she could handle the situation, she had hesitated to ask for help a second too long and had ended up hogtied on this little creep's bed. Now it was payback time. "Over there!" one of her men shouted. They turned the corner and saw a human figure. Guns flew out of holsters as if they were a posse of Wild West gunslingers.
"FBI, don't make a move,"
Tracy hollered, pointing her Glock 17 at a shadowy figure just a few yards from her.
"Don't shoot! Please don't shoot!"
a female voice responded. 4 beams from the search party's flashlights converged, shining with the intensity of stadium lights on what turned out to be a 5-member family in filthy rags. All had hollow, haunted eyes that winced from the light. They looked like a cross between the Jodes from the Grapes of Wrath and a tribe of hitherto undiscovered Neanderthals. Behind them tottered a makeshift cardboard dwelling. Miscellaneous belongings, ranging from jugs of water to a rusted tricycle, were piled 5 feet high in shopping carts. The youngest child, clutching a one-eyed teddy bear, even dirtier than she was, appeared to be no more than 3. They surely needed rescue from their predicament. A visit from social services or some other agency seemed to be in order, but that wasn't Tracy's concern at the moment.
"Sorry to scare you," she said. "Have you seen a man go this way?"
The small, ghostly waif pointed silently. X was crawling now through a flooded tunnel that narrowed at an alarming pace until it could barely accommodate his shoulders. His head was just above the stinking water. Why had he listened to that crackpot? He was going to drown like a rat. "I'm beginning to doubt my career choice," he whispered to himself. Then a faint light appeared in the distance. As he surged on, the light grew brighter and brighter, like the arrival of an archangel. It was an outlet. He felt a gentle breeze and plowed ahead, hoping against hope toward the light. If I get out of this, I'm going to another area of crime entirely. Carjacking, perhaps." But soon, to his horror, he saw that a rusted iron gate blocked his passage. The bars were thick as a man's wrist and spaced no more than 4 inches apart. A toddler couldn't squeeze through. X stopped and began to laugh at the good Lord's sadistic joke. His mad cackle echoed through the tunnel. Going back was not an option, so he crawled forward, wriggling on his belly like a snake now. As he got close, he saw that the grate was ajar. He pushed tentatively, and the grate swung open, creaking like the door of Dracula's castle. Egg slid out of the drainpipe and found himself in an open-air channel. Bulrush grass poked up from the stream, and cinder blocks cluttered the bottom. The concrete walls of the ditch had to be 20 feet high and fenced, with barbed wire crowning the top. But after what he'd been through, that seemed hardly formidable. After about 50 yards, he found a ladder, and, hand over hand, he pulled himself up the rungs. Miraculously, he found he was miles outside the city, which he could see, a hazy monument in the distance. It was raining cats and dogs, but the thorough drenching was welcome after the mire of the sewer. X shed his filthy clothes. He yearned mightily to burn them. Instead, he stretched them over a cactus, and when most of the muck was washed off, he wrung them out. If he could make it to a highway, he could hitchhike, get far from here. X began to walk, stiffly at first, and then with hope, toward the roar of the interstate. Chapter 10. Wheels Within Wheels. X stood by the side of the highway, surrounded by a bleak desert landscape Goya could have painted. Although he'd cleaned up to what he deemed a reasonable degree, and looked less like a zombie bum, a dozen cars zoomed past. He thought of that old Rutger Hauer movie, The Hitcher, and couldn't really blame them. Finally, after about half an hour, a battered yellow pickup pulled over. It bore 2 occupants, the driver a chrome dome with a long, straggly gray John Brown beard and alarmingly thick glasses, the passenger, a wiry man who could be his kid brother, sporting a baseball cap and a thick, handlebar mustache. "Whereabouts you headed?" X asked after they'd been on the road a few minutes. This time his voice had its normal mid-Atlantic inflection. He couldn't muster the energy, nor was there any real need, for a bogus accent. He had introduced himself as Jack, and the brothers didn't probe for details. "Groom Lake," replied Don, the bearded one. "Fishing?" X suggested. The brothers guffawed in stereo. "I guess you've never heard of Area 51?" asked Earl, the wiry one. X dimly recalled having read about such a place in a supermarket tabloid while standing in the checkout line. "It's some kind of a secret military base, isn't it?" Don now adopted an officious tone. "Jack, we're researchers with the Ohio Institute for Unexplained Phenomenon. We're investigating reports of new UFO activity on the base." He pronounced it UFO. "UFOs? You've heard of the Roswell incident?" X shook his head. The bearded man responded with a bewilderment, as if the hitchhiker had said he'd never heard of cornflakes. "In 1947, near Roswell, New Mexico, a UFO crashed. Air Force investigators visited the site and announced that it was a flying saucer. It was reported in newspapers coast to coast, but just a couple of days later, the Air Force retracted the story and claimed it was just a weather balloon. The story goes that alien remains were retrieved from the wreck." Earl chimed in. "It's also widely agreed that the Air Force recovered alien technology from the wreckage and took it to Area 51. Our scientists used reverse engineering to develop the stealth bomber, the Star Wars missile defense system, and a lot of other weaponry that's never been declassified, possibly even a time travel device." X nodded. "Why, it only stands to reason," he said encouragingly. He might have known no sane person would pick up a male hitchhiker these days. "Well, at least they seem harmless. No more than a 10% chance I'll wind up in a dozen different garbage bags along the highway," he thought. "When it comes to the federal government, you've got to understand that every word they tell the public is a lie, including and the," Don continued. "It's wheels within wheels, lies within lies, riddles inside of riddles. Heck, there's so many secret agencies today that keep secrets from one another. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And one group ends up foiling the plans another group has had in the works for decades." Earl added, "When that happens, they call it a wilderness of mirrors. If things go rhino and everyone ends up shooting each other, the team is sent in to cauterize the scene, liquidate all the compromised assets. They call it the 9mm pension plan. All the documentation on the botched mission goes to a place at CIA headquarters called the Pit, where it's dumped into an enormous shredder, then burned. You know, there are agencies not even other agencies know about. The most secret of all is called the Secret Committee. Earl interjected. It's so secret the president doesn't even know about it. They say it's been around since the American Revolution, and it's tied up with the French Foreign Legion. He wrapped his index and middle finger around each other to emphasize his closeness. Politicians pretend to hate France, but that's just a cover. We're like that. It's like the Kennedy assassination, Don said, warming to the topic. Did you know the real reason was that the CIA wanted to keep him from revealing the truth about extraterrestrials? Didn't know that, X said. JFK was about to reveal the presence of aliens on Earth in his speech that day in Dallas, Earl said, digging a crumpled newspaper clipping out of his pocket. See, I have it right here. The source of the article was unclear, but the byline was Mike Foster, which sounded like a pseudonym to X. He scanned the article quickly and saw that it included an excerpt from an undelivered speech. Citizens of the Earth, we are not alone. It began dramatically and continued in a distinctly Kennedy-esque style and cadence X recognized from documentaries. The source of the article was an upcoming book titled Killing the Messenger by one Professor Merrick. Here's the spooky part, Earl said, turning fully back to look at the passenger. You try to find this book on Amazon, and it isn't there. You Google this expert Merrick, and there's absolutely no trace of him. Don nodded gravely. It's like the guy has been erased. Poof. X had a feeling that the historian's lack of any footprint suggested something else entirely, but he'd gone 48 hours without sleep and had no interest in debating the subject. The world sure is full of mysterious stuff, he agreed and leaned back. As his rescuers launched into a feverish discussion of the role of the Illuminati in the presence of their symbols and monuments like the Statue of Liberty, he drifted off into an uneasy sleep, descending into a dream world populated by bulbous-headed ETs, a buoyant JFK with a bullet hole in his forehead, and the spiraling concentric circles of an impossible gyroscope, wheels within wheels within wheels. Go, 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 go! Floor it! X's eyes flew open, and he braced himself as the pickup tore down the road at better than 90 miles per hour. The whir of chopper blades flooded his eardrums, and he looked out the window. Overhead, a pair of sleek black helicopters hovered like hummingbirds. A huge, ugly machine gun projected out of the open door of one. "The Men in Black!" Earl gasped, more in awe than fear. "Like the movie?" said X, trying to determine if he was still dreaming. "The helicopters aren't in stealth mode. I can hear them," said Don. The chase lasted only a moment or two before the driver hit the brakes, nearly sending X through the windshield, and the pickup screeched to a stop about 20 yards in front of a roadblock. About 24 men in body armor toting assault rifles stood in front of a trio of jet-black Humvees. "Get out of the vehicle," a voice roared over a bullhorn. "Jesus Christ! They're going to kill us," Earl said. Tears were pouring down his face. "We know too much." "Don't panic, man," Don said, though his tremulous voice suggested he was doing just that. "They'll blank out our memories, that's all. Come on." The brothers climbed out of the cab, arms raised, walked a couple of yards, and prostrated themselves on the baking road. Men raced over and quickly cuffed them, and then dragged them away. Don kept whimpering that he didn't want all his memories erased, not the ones of childhood or "my first time." X got out of the car, hands raised. As he strode toward the roadblock, he began formulating in his mind the story he would tell. He was an identity thief, yes, but merely a pawn in a vast organization, and he would certainly be willing to cooperate if given a guarantee of immunity. X already had a name in mind. Jared Spinrad, age 35, from St. Louis. As he walked toward the row of guns pointed at him like a firing squad, one of the gleaming black helicopters whooshed down in front of him.
On your knees, now!
A voice boomed through another bullhorn, this one from the aircraft. He obliged, still holding his hands up high. 6 black-clad men, brandishing weapons that resembled M16s but a bit fancier, poured out of the chopper and ran toward him. What's with all this black? X thought. If it's to make themselves inconspicuous, it's not doing the trick. A female figure climbed out at last, a black woman with an FBI cap and flak jacket holding the bullhorn. As she approached, he recognized the agent who'd posed as Stacy the masseuse. A smile came to X's lips. Fancy meeting you here. Tracy didn't return his smile as she put down the bullhorn and cuffed him. The Boss Normand had moaned when she requisitioned a military-type drone aircraft to be on the lookout on this area, but it had paid off. Seeing this SOB face down on the asphalt was giving her so much satisfaction as she almost did smile. Ouch! Easy there, X said as the cuffs bit into his wrists. Now listen, sweetheart, there's been a big mistake, and I can clear up everything in about 2 minutes. My name isn't Sweetheart, you terrorist, baby-killing son of a bitch. She drew something metallic from her holster. Not a gun, X could see. A taser. Hey, that isn't necessary, he cried. I'm surrendering. The zap hurt like hell. It felt for a moment as if he were on fire. He collapsed backward. While he was still on the ground, one of the men rolled him onto his belly. From head to toe, his body shook uncontrollably as another goon rolled up his sleeve and stuck a hypodermic needle in his arm. Chapter 11. Rendition. When X awoke, he found himself wrapped in a blanket in what he quickly recognized as the cargo hold of an airplane. His hands were still secured behind his back with handcuffs, and his ankles were shackled as well. Well, this is an unpleasant surprise. A man clad in black from his cap to his steel-toed boots sat on a bench a few yards away, a huge .44 Magnum holstered at his side, his nose buried in a copy of the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. "Where are we going?" X said hoarsely. "That's for me to know and you to find out," the guard said without looking up and without a trace of playfulness. "Can I have a pillow and some peanuts?" X requested. "What's the in-flight movie?" His attempt at levity didn't merit even the slightest snicker from his guardian. X had heard of the process. Newspapers called it rendition, didn't they? He was undoubtedly bound for some gulag the CIA kept under wraps in countries like Egypt or Saudi Arabia, where torture, or as the U.S. media delicately called it, enhanced interrogation techniques, was legal. "Listen, I gotta talk to your commanding officer, ASAP." He deliberately spoke in a pronounced Brooklyn accent, to leave no doubt in his captor's mind that he was as American as a Nathan's hot dog. The guard neither replied nor tore his attention from page 41, which is to be excused since it featured a slice of Australian cheesecake who resembled a young Cindy Crawford. "There's been a mistake. I'm not Ali Nazir." Still no response. "I'm a U.S. citizen," he practically screamed. Now the guard rose and quietly approached him. He crouched in front of X, wearing an expression so savage it would have suited a Viking berserker. His blond eyebrows were nearly invisible, and his eyes the color of ice, adding to the frightfulness of his appearance. "Open your mouth," he instructed, drawing his sidearm. "Now, wait a minute. I said, open your fucking mouth." X parted his lips an inch, and the guard shoved the muzzle past his teeth, and so far down his throat he began to gag. "Don't open your damn trap again with that bullshit," his minder growled. "Say it again, and you're going to get your head blown off. Where you're going, we have people inside listening. Say that shit again, and you're dead meat. Nod if you understand me." Shaking like a sapling in an earthquake, X nodded. "Now I'm going to sit over there and relax. I strongly suggest you shut the fuck up for the rest of the flight." He withdrew the Dirty Harry weapon, wiped it on his pants and holstered it, then resumed his former position, calmly thumbing through the magazine. Under the circumstances, X elected not to attempt small talk for the remainder of the flight. It was hours, X had no idea how many, before the plane touched down, long enough to cross the Atlantic and then some, the identity thief thought. A pair of brawny men, similarly clad in black, apparently the look this season, came back to the hold and blindfolded him. He felt a rush of heat as the door to the cargo hold glided open, and he was led down a steep ramp, shuffling in the leg irons. The prisoner was shoved unceremoniously into the back of a truck. The vehicle roared to life noisily and then rumbled along. How long he sat on that metal bench in the back of the truck he couldn't tell. Perhaps 3 hours. His wrists ached and he was starving. He couldn't remember the last time he ate or drank. "Could someone loosen these handcuffs, please?" he said. There was no reply. "Okay, how about some water?" Again no answer. "Can you turn on the radio? I like to hear the latest from Lady Gaga." Finally the truck stopped. "Get out," ordered a gruff voice that exuded all the friendliness of a grizzly bear. With difficulty he rose, hunched over, and climbed out of the vehicle. He was marched in the leg irons, shuffling across a courtyard of some kind. A buzzer sounded, and metal doors clanged open. Complete cacophony assaulted X as he was hustled in. There were American voices barking orders, Arabic ones uttering prayers. Jesus, I really have been rendered. He was familiar enough with Arab dialects to know they spanned the Middle East. There were Yemeni, Iraqis, Saudis, and Jordanians. There were Afghanis, too, Iranians, and Pakistanis represented. When they finally took the blindfold off him, along with the cuffs, his eyes stung from bright fluorescent lights, and he shielded his pupils. He stood in a small room with grim, gray cinder-block walls. Somewhat ominously, he noted, there were dark red stains on the concrete floor. A female soldier with prominent breasts, a 6'5" giant, and a younger guy with bad acne faced him. The men sported buzz cuts, the woman a short, butch-looking hairdo. All wore what looked like Marine uniforms, with the name tags and rank insignia missing. Not a good sign, X thought. "Strip down, son. Write down your birthday suit," ordered the big guy with a deep Mississippi accent. There was nothing avuncular about the son. He came off like a KKK cretin snarling boy. X took off his now ragged jacket and shirt and dropped them to the floor. He hesitated when he got to the pants. When he escaped the hotel suite, he hadn't had the time to don underwear. Despite a life of crime that extended to his early teens, X had never been arrested and never strip-searched, never been naked in front of a clothed person since childhood. He avoided eye contact with the female soldier, who made no effort to turn away, evincing neither interest nor embarrassment, like she'd been through this 1,000 times, which X supposed she had. Reluctantly, he dropped his trousers and stepped out of them, placing his hands over his genitals. Without his clothes, he felt vulnerable as a newborn baby. More than that, he felt stripped of all identity. "Open your mouth," Giant Redneck said. X obliged. The Southerner's thick, gloved fingers probed his mouth roughly, lifting his tongue and peering under it with a penlight. He stood back and nodded to Big Tits, who smirked at X. "Turn around," she ordered. She, too, was wearing yellow latex gloves. "Now wait," X began. "Shut up," Big Redneck commanded. "You heard her." X sighed, turned around, fearing what was coming next. "Bend over," Big Tits barked in a sadistic tone that more properly befitted an audition for a low-budget women-in-prison movie. X hesitated. "Wait," he said. "Just wait a second." "The lady said bend the fuck over, turd," Pizza Face snarled. "He's from the north, somewhere in New Jersey. Am I going to have to bend you the fuck over?" X leaned forward. "Clap your hands on your ass," the female soldier said. He obeyed. "Spread your ass cheeks. Wider. Wider." X wanted to kill her. "Ugh," she spat in disgust. "You have the hairiest asshole I've ever seen." Pizza Face guffawed. fucking Chewbacca. Giant Redneck's deep laugh was unnervingly similar to a mule's. Being stripped by a woman was supposed to humiliate him. X knew that much from Time magazine. Muslim men were supposedly so uptight that to be nude in the presence of an American woman would be abhorrent. He remembered reading how one poor detainee at Guantanamo Bay had been tortured by a CIA agent who kept rubbing her chest in his nose. Poor devil, X had thought at the time. X didn't share the Muslim view. Frankly, he preferred that the woman was conducting the cavity search. If that hillbilly was doing it, it would be like something out of Deliverance. Still, this was hardly tea with the Queen. He let go of his butt cheeks and started to rise. "Get back down," the woman said. "I'll tell you when to stop cracking a smile. Spread wider." X sighed. When this piece of work leaves the service, she could make a mint as a dominatrix. "Come on, this ain't your first rodeo," John Redneck rumbled. "We know you towelheads hump each other every chance you get. Fuck the Koran." He braced himself for the insertion of a finger. "It's not a dick, it's not a dick, it's not a dick," he told himself. His heart was palpitating and he felt like throwing up. The finger didn't come, only a flashlight illuminated its alimentary canal. After what seemed like an inordinate amount of time, Big Tits told him to stand up and turn around. "Lift up your nutsack." X sighed and hoisted his testicles. "Okay, it's just like being at a doctor's office getting a hernia test," he told himself. "Jesus Christ, are you getting a goddamn heart-on?" the female soldier demanded in patently false alarm. "No," X stammered. "Don't give me that shit. Yes, you fucking are. You're disgusting," she said, turning to Giant Redneck. "Sarge, this sack of shit towelhead is flashing me, the fucking pervert." The big southerner got so close to X he could smell tobacco on the soldier's breath. X drew brief satisfaction from the thought the brute would probably die from lung cancer, a tracheotomy hole in his little Abner neck. "Are you insulting the United States Marines, son?" Giant Redneck growled. "Look, I'm not," X sputtered. "This is ridiculous." "Now he's calling me a liar," Big Tits complained, aghast, crossing her arms and pouting. Without warning, Giant Redneck kicked him in the family jewels with his steel-toed boots. X crumpled to the floor, his eyes welling with tears. The pain was simply unbelievable. "Chris, get the pooch," Giant Redneck said. "Now we're talking," Pizza Face said with a wide grin. He disappeared into an adjoining room, and after a moment X heard feverish barking. He wasn't especially afraid of dogs, but facing one nude was another story. The female soldier stood with her arms folded, looking on approvingly. "This is going to be so fun," she declared. "Best entertainment we've had since karaoke night." "Your oops, I did it again really kicked ass," Giant Redneck was thoughtful enough to mention. "Thanks." Pizza Face reappeared, leading a huge black mastiff by a leash. Where the hell did they even get that thing? The identity thief wondered. The creature looked like something you'd find guarding the gates of hell. All that was missing were 2 extra heads. He scuttled back on his rear end as Pizza Face led the beast on a leash toward him. "Go on, boy, sniff out the terrorist," Pizza Face said encouragingly. The dog began to snarl and pull toward the prisoner. The giant canine began to bark, a deep Hound of the Baskervilles bellow. X cowered in the corner of the room, desperately trying to shield his reproductive organs from the snapping jaws of the hellhound. "Hey, guys, come on! This is taking it a little bit far, isn't it?" "Listen to him trying to sound like an American," Big Tits said, and spat on the floor contemptuously, the wad missing X by millimeters. "Must watch a lot of American Idol on TV." "Talking fucking Arabic," Giant Redneck growled. "Say another word in English, and you won't believe what happens next." "We ought to let Rambo here rape his monkey ass," Pizza Face suggested, letting out some of the leash and allowing the monstrous hound to bound within a foot of the prisoner. "Yeah, don't they fuck their camels?" Big Tit said and chortled. "Go on, Rambo. Bite his tiny little wiener off," Pizza Face commanded. X was in the fetal position now, his face tucked between his knees and his hands covering his genitals. Rambo's snout was so close he could feel its breath on his body. His intellect told him there was no way American soldiers, even if given license to ignore the Geneva Conventions, were going to stand by while a dog emasculated him. But the ancient fear of being eaten took over, and he was shaking in terror. "Get your hands off your dick," Pizza-Face yelled. "Stop trying to protect it. It's gone, dude. Live with it. It's history. Mr. Winky is going bye-bye. You're going to be a unit." "Eunuch, idiot," the identity thief thought.
"He said, get your hands off your dick,"
Giant Redneck roared.
"A partner wants to get another look at what you're packing. Weren't you trying to show off your weak little wee-wee just a minute ago?"
Tears began to roll down X's cheeks. Jesus, he hadn't cried since he was 10. He hoped they wouldn't notice, but no such luck.
"Oh, look. Mr. Terrorist Big Shot is crying. He's crying like a little bitch,"
Giant Redneck said. He signaled to Pizza-Face to pull back the dog.
"You're pathetic. You know that?" the big man said with disgust. "I guess you're pretty tough when it comes to blowing unarmed babies to Kingdom Come, but stick a gun in your face and you show your true colors. Yellow."
"You said it, dude," Pizza-Face echoed. They traded high fives.
"Get on your knees, puke face,"
Giant Redneck commanded. X crawled to his knees, grateful for the dog's retreat.
"Now apologize to Madison for flashing her,"
the Marine said, crossing his arms. "I'm sorry," X said. He thought, okay, maybe this little exercise in performance art is winding down. Giant Redneck and Pizza-Face exchanged looks of puzzlement that was obviously fake.
"Excuse me? What was that?"
the Southerner said, cupping a hand over his ear. X could scarcely think at this point. "I'm sorry, ma'am?" he tried.
"In Arabic, dumb shit."
He repeated the words in Arabic.
"That's more like it,"
Giant Redneck said, and with one sweeping kick he sent X sprawling. X was outfitted with an orange prison jumpsuit and ill-fitting white Army-issue skivvies a size too small, which, as he later learned, was quite a privilege. Some of the prisoners were forced to wear pink panties for weeks after their arrival. He was tossed into a windowless, cement-walled cell, no more than 12 square feet. A naked light bulb hung from the middle of the ceiling. There was a steel toilet and a bunk bed. On the bottom bunk, a boy of about 17, sporting peach fuzz on his cheeks, lay reading the Koran. The teen jumped up excitedly. "At last a companion. I was growing mad with loneliness." "Aloha," X sighed. "Asar Gulzar of Kabul," the cellmate said in Arabic, with an accent that X recognized as Afghani. The teen scrutinized his face. "Are you truly Ali Nazir? There have been rumors whispered that you had arrived here." X was in no mood to argue. He nodded. "It is an honor to meet you, sir. Come, come. You may have my bunk." "I couldn't," X responded in Arabic, but the young man insisted and led X to the lower bunk, where he collapsed. "So you are the great Ali Nazir," Asar said admiringly. "You have become a legend here. Everyone has heard how you eluded the Americans in their own country for so long." "You get TV here," X replied, surprised that his exploits were already the stuff of legend. Asar laughed. "No, but a boy was brought in yesterday who told us the whole story. You are truly a brave warrior in the jihad." X tried to think of something that would shut the guy up for a while. "All praise belongs to Allah," he said. "It is He who gives me strength." Indeed, indeed," agreed Asar. "Would you like some toffee? I have a small tin." X nodded, and the boy shared with him. It was chewy but sweet, and as the first food to enter his mouth since a handful of peanuts and the Pink Panther, what seemed eons ago, much appreciated. "I have been doing my part for the jihad as well," Asar said. "Nothing so grand as you, of course. I shouldn't even mention it." "Please, tell me," X begged, although, of course, he didn't have the slightest interest. The teen puffed out his chest proudly. "For 2 years I was the driver for the chief. Every day I was by his side." "You are very young to have been given such responsibility," X said. "Allowing this juvenile delinquent to think I am Ali Nazir may play to my advantage. I learned to drive a tractor on my uncle's farm when I was 12, Asar explained. "I drove a cab in Kabul for 3 years. After that, you can either drive like a racing car driver or you've been killed in an accident." As X anticipated, Asar was not shy about detailing his exploits serving the chief. On one occasion, so he claimed, the driver rescued the terrorist honcho from Mossad agents who were on his trail by taking a shortcut through a crowded market. "It was like something you'd see in a James Bond movie," Asar reminisced fondly. "Merchants were pushing their carts out of the way, melons were rolling. The chief awarded me a medallion. I would show it to you, but the Americans took it from me when I arrived." Asar asked X about his own reception, and X told him about his mistreatment at the hands of the U.S. soldiers. "The Americans are real pigs," Asar declared angrily. X could hardly argue with him. "The etiquette could use some fine-tuning," he conceded. Over the following days, X was allowed to mingle with fellow prisoners in the exercise yard. They hailed from all over the Middle East, the Gaza Strip, Yemen, even a contingent from Indonesia, and a thin, jet-black brother from Somalia. "This is the hero who made fools of the Americans," Asar would proudly introduce him. "We have become great friends." They spent their time in the cell, reading each other passages from the Quran. X had never even thumbed through it before, nor had he gotten past knowing the Bible, for that matter. His religious knowledge consisted of what he dimly recalled from coloring books he read in a Sunday school his mother had dragged him to. Before his imprisonment was over, X would end up knowing many verses from the Islamic holy book by heart. At night they lay on their bunks and chatted. Asar proved to be the talkative type and very curious. He asked specifics about X's operations in Kuwait. X told him that such information was top secret, and Asar nodded gravely. Asar, a former street urchin whose father abandoned the family when he was 8, was intrigued that X came from a wealthy family and wanted to know all about what it was like growing up in the lap of luxury. X had no clue what life was like for some Richie Rich in Kuwait, but since he knew Asar didn't either, he felt free to confabulate. He described in detail his father's mansion and the beautiful silk dresses his mother and sisters wore, the life-sized marble statues, the Olympic-sized swimming pool with a waterfall gushing down into it from the landscaped hillside. Asar oohed and ahed, and X embellished further and further, inventing a palatial estate worthy of an oriental despot. The physical descriptions came mostly from old movies he used to watch with his mother, like The Prince of Baghdad. It was the only time he remembered her being at peace, the two of them lost together in a fantasy world. Each night, Ali Nazir regaled the teen with tales of family trips around the world to hot spots like Paris and Beijing, playing with the children of rich and famous movie stars and jet-setters. He became Asar's Scheherazade. X had to admit it was fun creating this blissful imaginary childhood so different from his own. The rich, powerful father, the doting, educated mother reading Dickens and Shakespeare to him, and his loving siblings at bedtime. Asar would ask him to repeat stories, and X did, fleshing them out with more minute details as he did. Some were funny, he told anecdotes about maids and gardeners who misunderstood orders, plagiarized from a homophone challenge to Amelia Bedelia, that made the teen roar with laughter. A week passed before Ali Nazir was escorted from his cell for his first interrogation. "Be strong, my brother," Asar told him, clapping him on the back. "We'll have him back in a jiffy," one of the guards said cheerfully. "You'll be amazed at how quick your hero breaks." X was marched down a long corridor with barred cells on either side. It looked like one of those old black-and-white movies about Alcatraz, except that rather than Jimmy Cagney or George Raft, the residents were bearded, swarthy men, 2 or 3 to a cell. Some were prostrate in prayer, others were scribbling on pads, some saluted him, a few even bowed reverently. "Allah will protect you, brother," one called. Unfortunately, the identity thief didn't believe in Allah or hold much stock in the God of the Hebrews either. He was shoved into a small, barren room at the end of the hall. X was not pleased to see that Pizza Face, Giant Redneck, and Big Tits were all in attendance. This time they were joined by a clean-cut young man in natty, wire-rimmed glasses that must have cost $600, a blue blazer, yellow sweater, and fraternity tie. He looked as if he were home for the holidays from an exclusive prep school. "I give him about 8 minutes," Pizza Face snickered. "5," said Big Tits. "It's a bet." They shook hands. He was stripped again and hung by his wrists with ropes from a hook on the ceiling. The yuppie stepped forward and spoke in a calm voice, barely above a whisper. "Now let me tell you the game plan for today, Mr. Nazir," he said. "I'm going to ask you questions, and you're going to answer them. Any time you don't answer, this gentleman will do something to you that's not very nice." He pointed to an ugly-looking cattle prod in the hands of Giant Redneck. This time X was ready for them. He would not be intimidated. He would not be crushed. "You can't torture me," X said smugly. "We want CNN, you know. I know your leaders have forbidden it." The yuppie laughed, and the soldiers followed suit. "That's right, dude. All that went out with the Bush administration. You have absolutely nothing at all to worry your little head about." He nodded to the Giant Redneck, who poked X in the testicles with a cattle prod. Volts lanced through his gonads, and X screamed in agony. It was hard to believe he'd ever be able to reproduce. "Okay," he thought. "Hold out for a minute to make it believable, then tell them the most credible lie you can muster."